Necessarily reflect the views and opinions of Genesis Communications, its management, staff, or advertisers.
From the heart of Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media. A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gronowski. Welcome back to the program. We're going to go through the news together like we always do, guided by principles, not tribalism and groupthink. And that means we've got to cut through the hate that the media continues to sow and look for truth, look for positivity, look for things that can inspire the human imagination and not tear things down. That's all the media has for us right now. Tear down, tear down, tear down, tear down. And they want to whitewash science. They want to eliminate history. They want to attack classical music. Shakespeare's a problem. Math's a problem. Showing up on time's a problem. This is a Luddite, idiotic, mind-numbingly dumb ideology, but it's effective because it plays on envy, it plays on hate, it plays on trying to divide and put other people down. And that's what we have to push back against. We can't allow people to succumb to bullying like this so that they can't enjoy their life without constantly being picked on and otherized. Meanwhile, Reuters reports that the U.S. FDA may authorize the vaccine for COVID-19 for kids based on 2 months of safety data. That's how hardworking they are for your safety. 2 months is all they need for something that's never been put in humans like this, and you're going to push this onto children. They won't tell them to stop eating the toxic vegetable oils, which is scientifically proven to be driving obesity and metabolic disorders and comorbidities that some kids may be having. Nope, won't tell them to do that. That's scientifically well tested for decades. What's causing that? No one won't say a single word with their little nanny state powers they presume to have, but they certainly will carry the water for pharmaceutical companies that put their Muppets in the positions that they're in today. The article also said in Reuters, for children between 6 months and 2 years, Pfizer has said it could have a safety and immunogenicity data as early as October or November. So they're getting excited about being able to extend their mandatory medicine that you can't reverse. It's permanent. You know, you put this in your body, you can't take it out or anything. You've got to have this thing. And they want to extend this to 6-month-old babies. Okay. Again, they won't tell you to stop putting the soy formula for the baby, but they will. There's no money there. Who's the money lobby? Where's the patent to get you to stop eating seed oils for your kids? Huh? There's none of that. They don't have that. What they do have is, giant, hungry, insane, out of control bureaucrats and their corporate cronies that put them in power, dictating to you what health is. The Hill reports Pfizer is to seek approval for vaccine in children 5 and over. So the Pfizer wants to go ahead and get this in mandated to every little kid. They don't care. All these executives making billions of dollars, where will they be in 50 years when the kids that have these things, if they have things that are lasting effects? They won't know. It takes time to find out these things. That's why ethical, decent, humane societies don't put kids and don't put pregnant women on the front lines of these types of experiments. But we don't have an ethical or sane society right now. We have a madhouse of morally bankrupt people that have no respect for any human dignity. They don't care. If they want to abort babies even after they're born, why the heck do you think they're going to give a care about your ethical considerations? These people are power hungry. They have an axe to grind. They're miserable people, and they want to spread that misery to you by making you feel awful if you don't comply with their one-size-fits-all decrees from on high. Glenn Greenwald reports he's one of the few sane, honest journalists left in America today, and so therefore he's hated. He's a member of the kind of progressive ideology wing of America, but he's very much hated by people who've lost their minds into worshiping corporations in that party. He says the unvaccinated in America are overwhelmingly low-income people, which means any punitive measures against those refusing vaccinations loss of jobs, bar on entrance to public spaces or travel would disproportionately fall on those who are most economically vulnerable. And it shows a chart showing that people who make less than $25,000, 7 million of them have not received the vaccine by household income. This is 7 million of people with less than $25,000 household income. It's one of the highest groups of people. Also, one of the highest groups of hesitancy are the ones who actually have had, PhDs, but media doesn't like talking about that. They like to pretend like they're smart, and they want to gaslight you into believing that only ignorant people would ever disobey their commands. So Glenn makes a good point. The unvaccinated are overwhelmingly low-income people, and now they're being excluded. They're being treated like a scapegoat class. As many people have reported, Joe Rogan and many others, people on the left like Tim Dillon and comedians, they're saying, hey, you guys are talking about people who don't get your products like they're vermin, like they're scum, like they're animals or something. And you see it. It's very common to try to talk in a kind of genocidal, despicable manner about people. And people are so ignorant of history, they can't see how they're following into the same hateful, bigoted mindset that has led to all kinds of awful, oppressive measures in history. Collectivism is an ugly mind virus, and it's hard to stop it once society agrees to normalize hatred of people who are different. And that's exactly what Biden is doing. He's angry, as I mentioned earlier. Yesterday, when the news of his announcement came out, my first analysis is still what I keep telling you. He's mad that he was exposed. His pants fell down in Afghanistan. He made a fool. Everybody laughed at him. They're bowling up, laughing at these frauds that his regime represents, these bureaucrats, warmongers, banker lovers. Bailouts for banks is what they want. Corporate welfare for giant energy companies is what they love. Welfare crumbs thrown to you on the ground to make you feel appeased. That's their modus operandi. And they were humiliated, utterly, just completely, disgracefully, embarrassingly humiliated and exposed for their idiotic incompetence in Afghanistan. And so they needed to come back home and domestically scapegoat and abuse and beat up on people who don't go along with their little regime plans here for nation building here at home. So that's what this is all about. He's trying to curry favor with the media class, which is mad at Biden for going through with bringing the troops out of Afghanistan. And he also wants to curry favor with special interests, with the big pharma, because if big military is mad at him, he can always go cry to big pharma and say, hey, look, I'm giving you everything you want. Imagine that grift that they have. Obscene profits. It's like a captured market. It's literally a captured market. Anybody who works for a company, 100 employees or more, is captured. I mean, how unethical is that? They're going to force pregnant women and people with immune compromised situations to have to gamble with something, even if think about it. And that they're totally morally bankrupt and corrupt to the core when they don't even try to cover their tails by providing some exemption for people who have natural immunity, which is a much more superior, longer lasting deal, according to all the research that continues to pile up. They don't give you any, no, that's not enough. People with natural immunity, they actually provide more robust protection for the vulnerable, but they are treated as scum of the universe because their natural immunity is not patented by Pfizer and the other companies. You see? So because what they have is naturally occurring, it's dead to Washington. They don't care. They could care less. They don't want science. They want patented, scientifically sound, science is only in the service of patented profits. That's it. I'm not saying whether their products, I don't tell you one way or the other about the products. What you think of them is your business. It's not my business. What you want to do with yourself. But this idea that they only promote things that are patented is pretty obvious. It's pretty obvious to anybody who's paying attention. Reuters reported back, this story was published on 5 months ago. Pfizer and unions and others donated $61.8 million for $61.8 million for Biden's inaugural. Okay? So they get what they pay for, don't they? You know? They get what they pay for. They write a little check to that little low rent puppet. Probably bought some of his son's crackhead art too. $1 million contribution, including Pfizer, maker of the vaccines. AT&T, they had the same views. Bank of America, they had the same views. Boeing, they had the same views. Same exact one-party ideology. No tolerance for dissent. No tolerance for diversity of thought. A very imperialistic mindset. They pay that boy, and he does what they tell him to do. He's done that his entire life. That boy will sell out for an Egg McMuffin and a Senior Diet Coke. The guy has no backbone. He has no principles. The dude came onto the scene running for president in the 80s, right? And what was he pushing? He was plagiarizing somebody else's life as if it was his. Totally disgraced, total loser. And that's their favorite kind of people in D.C. Empty suit cowards that know how to manipulate people with rhetoric. They love those sophists. Demagogues and sophists with empty suits and empty moral principles are the perfect candidates to thrive in D.C., especially when they can stay on script, which Trump wasn't able to do, which is why he was persona non grata for those years he was there. So that's the thing that we have to realize is that, you get what you pay for, don't you? And it all goes back to that takeaway line that this guy rolled out when he declared that he was going to be pushing for dictatorial powers to pick on people who don't want the king's medicine, just like Daniel chapter 1, the story where the king mandated you have to do this way, and the others said, no, we're not going to do it that way. And they won. And so the takeaway line, one of the takeaway lines from his staff script they wrote for him was that we have to protect the vaccinated from the unvaccinated. That's Biden's quote. We have to protect the vaccinated from the unvaccinated. Again, millions of people who are in that unvaccinated category, he's declaring war on and bullying in the most disgusting anti-American thing I've ever seen. They have better herd immunity than the people he's saying are the protected class. You see how they're trying to pit people against each other? Against science facts? Against completely in the face? This is crank nonsense pseudoscience trash that the media is spewing to try to create a scapegoating fervor to persecute, dehumanize, and otherize people who don't want to go along with their one-size-fits-all approach to this problem. And so he's trying to just turn the attention away from his constant failures and show off that, hey, look, see, I can still scapegoat people. I'm very good at running government. Look at how I can whip up fervor and hatred and division amongst people. I mean, can you imagine what kind of a unethical punk this guy has to be to try to threaten people like a pregnant woman, for example? Pregnant woman. You'd never put experimental products in a pregnant woman, and they didn't even test for that. They didn't test for these products for pregnant women. You're going to tell a pregnant woman, you must take this product, or a woman who wants to be pregnant, you must take this product. Despite the anecdotal stories they hear piling up all over the internet, you must take this product or you're fired. Get out. It's pathetic. This is the scummiest low that this failing DC party, uniparty, has ever gotten to. The lowest of the low. You never put pregnant women and women who want to be pregnant and things like that, you never put them in the front line of some kind of experiment with legal immunity. So the women can't even have any claim to lawsuit or anything if something goes wrong. Nope. Meanwhile, those guys make billions of dollars in profits. Billions and billions and billions. And they threaten countries if they don't give them the sweetheart deals when they roll out their products around the world to countries with less wealth. It's an absolute atrocity. This Democratic Party has totally embraced its roots as a corporate fascist political entity, and the media is gleeful to do their bidding. But that's why their ratings are failing. That's why people are turning off the boob tube, and that's why people are really remembering what it is about America that made us a special place for the rule of law and liberty. Will we recover that respect for the rule of law before it's too late? A Neighbor's Choice will be back. You can call in at 727-587-1040. That's 727-587-1040.
David Gronowski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa. Not attorney spokeswoman.
A Neighbor's Choice returns. It's a wild time, but it's a good time because it allows us to remember why liberty is so important, why principles matter, why ethical decency matters, why we have to restrain power so that it's not so intoxicating that people would destroy their whole neighbors' lives just to have an ounce more of it. All of those things are at play here in this time of really realizing what it is that we stand for. Here we are 20 years after 9/11, tomorrow, 20th anniversary. And we declared a war on terror, and all we did was terrorize our own liberties, destroyed our liberties. We didn't even go and get Osama bin Laden when we had him in Tora Bora. Went off to go with Saddam Hussein and do all that. Trillions of dollars spent, thousands of lives lost, things destroyed, nations displaced, ancient communities destroyed, PTSD, moral injury, all kinds of things carried on for generations because of this. And what do we want to do on that anniversary now? The president, who was a part of bungling that whole war on terror, which became a war on our liberties, Patriot Act, TSA, all this warrantless searches and surveillance state. The American people are getting more and more irritated with having it, but they don't do enough to stand up to it. They're too busy watching, Dallas Cowboys versus Bucks, which is, look, it's wonderful, but you can't just stay ignorant. You've got to fight for your liberties and as well as enjoy, relaxation as well. You got to do both. You got to have great joy and great fun and also great consideration for what it means to be an adult. You're supposed to protect your liberty for your family, your kids, future generations. Robert Malone, MD, mRNA tech inventor, used in these products that they want mandated. He says regarding the why, as opposed to, he's saying, why are they doing all this? He says, I cannot speak to the original intent, Great Reset, etc., above my pay grade, but what I do see is that the Pfizer contracts with nation states reveals a new OPEC-like situation where monopoly control of a key resource is leverageable for geopolitical advantage. What has been also revealed is a new disruptive technology, mRNA, as a drug, including the vaccine application, which is likely to disrupt the global pharmaceutical industry and which is currently controlled by a very small number of corporate structures. These corporations and their suppliers are being rapidly consolidated and are almost exclusively controlled by wealthy Western nations and the financial interests which functionally control those nations. This creates a power imbalance and colonial-like opportunities. I think that's a great assessment of the geopolitical situation involved with the way these products are being pushed on people. So I'm really concerned for people. They're talking about how, mental health problems are through the roof in these countries and America is dealing with it. And they're talking about trying to get people back to work. Who's going to want to go to work if you have to take products? There's nothing more degrading than to have to take something in your body that's permanently in there. It's not like you can take something out or something. Once you get it, it's there, and you have no ability to dissent against it. You get it treated like you're a scum of the universe, even if you've had natural herd immunity, which is a more robust deal. You're still treated like scum. That's pathetic. It's despicable, bigoted nonsense. And this love trumps hate maddened crowd needs to get a reality check. Because these people have lost their ever-loving minds. And they've lost their power grip, too, by the way. The left has had support and control of the institutions for so long, and it's falling apart faster than they can possibly imagine. And that's why they're freaking the heck out, because they're in the process of waking up that the world is not the frickin' fake reality that they've been trying to tell themselves to all this time. They want to believe that, their little, the way they think of left-wing utopian dreams is just another unicorn away. At any moment now, we'll get our little utopia and we'll get all the bad guys out because we're perfectly good. They don't believe in human fallen nature. They don't believe in human sin. And that's why they think they're sinless and perfect, and therefore they can impose their will onto people who are less than them. It's absolutely contemptible, regurgitated, barbaric, brutish behavior that's been here since the dawn of time. And we will defeat it. We will defeat it intellectually, culturally, technologically, through the market, and through the legal systems. We'll do whatever we can to destroy this flailing, dying ripoff of Christianity. You can't call yourself a follower of Jesus and want to impose a product forcibly onto your neighbor for them to be able to feed their family. You cannot say that you're a Christian and you're doing that. Totally contemptuous against the following of Jesus Christ. Let's take a quick break and return with Jerry Bowyer in just a moment. Stay with us.
It was about 9 o'clock in the morning.
We stood and watched in disbelief.
I was scared. We watched that second plane hit that tower.
I literally just froze.
Kind of shocked.
Afraid.
Saw this terrorist act, and
this moment isn't real.
It was the day that changed America forever.
It was two realizations, right? One, that the immediate death toll, and then that this was an attack on America.
I don't want people to ever forget.
News Talk 1040.
Brewing over vaccination requirements.
A day after President Biden announced a new vaccine mandate for private businesses with 100 or more employees, Florida Republican Governor Ron DeSantis accusing the president of overreach.
If the federal government can get away with doing this, going right at the heart of people's livelihoods and their ability to provide for their families, what's going to come next?
As hospitals crowded with unvaccinated COVID cases near the breaking point in his state and others, DeSantis says
people should not be cast aside because they make a medical decision for themselves.
A decision not to get vaccinated leaves people 10 times more likely to wind up in the hospital, according to the CDC. Dave Packer, ABC News.
Also today, an appellate court reinstated the governor's ban on school mask mandates in Florida. The White House confirming U.S. flights on Afghan evacuees bound for the U.S. have been halted after 4 people who landed in the U.S. had measles. They're in quarantine. Michelle Franzen, ABC News.
News Talk 1040, Tampa Bay weather forecast.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm meteorologist Ellen Archer at your News Talk 1040 WHPO Weather Center. We're expecting to stay partly cloudy through the weekend, just like today. From the west-southwest will be showers and thunder showers keying in any time of the day or night, with our thunder shower probabilities running at about 35% this afternoon, 40% tonight, 50% Saturday, only 25% Sunday. The high is at 90, low 76 here at News Talk 1040 WHPO.
Who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day, they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved 2 people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com.
A Neighbor's Choice returns. I'm David Gronowski, your host, and I'm here with my friend Jerry Bowyer, who's the editor of Town Hall Finance and of several other outlets, and a host of a podcast program that he's just launched. How you doing, Jerry?
I'm fine, David. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's great having you back, and it's a wild time to be reporting on news and trying to make sense of it in this time, huh?
Oh, it's incredible because there's so many conflicting accounts, and there's no, people don't know who to trust. And frankly, we got rid of basic logic from a public education about 100 years ago. So we don't know how to think anymore. And you've got scapegoats and counter scapegoating mechanisms. And, people are really having trouble figuring out what's going on. And at times like that, sometimes you just don't know. And at that point, you have to sort of go back to basic principles and say, even if I don't know all the details, even if I don't know everything there is to know, and even if I don't know who to trust, I do know what principles to trust. And I think that, that's kind of where you're going. And I think that's very helpful at times like this.
Yeah, so let's start off with the person who we should be looking to first and foremost if we're imitators of Jesus is what would Jesus do here? Is Jesus okay with forcing our neighbors to inject things into their bodies, anything? It could be Flintstone vitamins. It could be forcing your neighbor to wear a Band-Aid or something. Does Jesus have a provision for coercing your neighbor to take something in order for them to feed their family?
Well, Jesus was a rabbi, right? So as a rabbi, he taught Torah, and Torah didn't have, it did not force any medical remedy on anyone. Now, there was some quarantining, but there's a quarantining of those who are sick, which is an entirely different matter than preemptively making someone take a medicine so that they won't be sick and then treating them as though they're a leper not because they're a leper, but because they haven't taken the medicine. We just don't have anything like that. I mean, there's a lot of material in the Bible that's about precautions, et cetera. So my base rate assumption is that when Jesus is talking about the social questions in Israel, that he's speaking as someone who's a Torah observant rabbi, and he didn't do anything. That those weren't the teachings. So I don't want to speak for him, but I don't see him push. I don't see in his ministry him pushing anything like that. Doesn't even push his own healing. I mean, think about this. Let's say that, we can argue about how much there is in terms of side effects. I don't want to argue about it, but every medicine has a side effect. So let's say you see the vaccines have a side effect. Maybe 1% of people, maybe 0.5%, maybe 50%. That's not my point right now. Jesus, his healing never had a negative side effect, and yet he never forced it on anyone. What do you want? He asked the blind man. Do you want to see? Oh, you want to see? Okay. So Jesus never healed anybody against their will. And Jesus can make very strong cases, the second person of the Trinity, that he knew exactly what he was doing with healing. So the idea of taking something which might have side effects, et cetera, and forcing that on other people seems to be inconsistent with his actions while a human here on earth, and it seems to be inconsistent with Torah, which he as a rabbi taught. So I can't get a biblical case for forcing vaccinations or any other medical procedure on anybody against their will.
Yeah, so you've got 100 million people potentially affected by Biden's new edict. Many governors, including, 19 governors, have said they're not going to be going along with that. Where's the church play a role in all of this? I mean, the church barely does anything about stuff like this anymore, but I think they should. Where's the C.S. Lewis's, the G.K. Chesterton's, Christian giant thinkers stepping up and doing what you're doing, which is to try to explain how Jesus would approach this kind of debate?
Well, I don't think we produce them anymore. And I guess if we did produce them, we wouldn't notice them because it's hard to hear them through the noise machine.
And they'd be banned on YouTube. They'd be banned on YouTube and Twitter by now, probably. But
well, that's true. Yeah. So there's a couple of things. One, there's banning going on clearly, and it's biased banning. If somebody overstates the risk of a vaccination, they're going to get banned. If somebody understates the risk of a vaccination, they're not going to get banned from YouTube. So, I mean, I could say one thing, like YouTube could say, anybody who says something that's not backed up by the evidence is banned. I wouldn't like that, but it would be consistent. Or they could say, hey, let the people decide and not ban anything. But instead, what they do is they put a thumb on the scale and they ban one side of a debate. But that's not the banning that I'm really worried about that much. I know we conservatives like to talk about it, and it does bother me, and it's wrong. But there's almost a worse banning, which is the banning of the noise machine so that we can't even hear truth. So let me put it this way. If you come in and start saying something that I don't like, I can kick you out of the room. But let's say you come into a room that's got 50 people and they all have megaphones, and you don't have a megaphone and they're screaming all the time. I can't hear you. So even though I didn't ban you, you're still not being heard. And so we as a culture, to the degree that we're all screaming into megaphones all the time, people who don't really know much of anything but are confident anyway, that basically drowns out the possibility of hearing wisdom. There's even something in the Bible about that. The old lady wisdom is crying in the streets. How long will you love simplicity? How long will you will you hate wisdom? And Lady Wisdom is not heard. And she warns, if you keep not listening, eventually I won't be here anymore. And I think we've reached that phase. We didn't listen, and so we really don't have reliable sources of wisdom in the marketplace, except in little tiny corners that are generally not heard in favor of the people who are the banners or the gatekeepers or the screamers.
So does the church play a role that, should they step up and encourage their parishioners to not go along with forcing, their pregnant employees and other people who've got herd immunity naturally and so forth? I mean, it just seems so despicable, that I don't see how this is compatible with being a Christian in good standing. I believe in church discipline, and I don't see how you could be an employer of 100 plus people and say, "Yep, I don't care. I'm 60 years old. I don't care what this 20-year-old pregnant woman's going to deal with in 40 years, or 20 years. It's despicable to me. It's absolutely despicable. I can't accept any Christian being a part of this.
Let's make a distinction between government-mandated vaccines and employee-mandated vaccines. And at this point, we've got to get into zones of, well, what are we talking about? Are we talking about someone who works in hospice, or a nursing home, where the argument for vaccination is stronger because you have people at extremely high risk levels? Or you're talking about people who are at very low risk levels. And that's why I believe in freedom. So I think that business owners and entrepreneurs ought to work this out with their employees. I'm mainly focused on actual government coercion. So what would the role of the church be? Well, to lay out principles. One of the principles is subsidiarity, which is decisions have to be made closest to those who are affected by those decisions. There's principles about human dignity, and you have to balance these things. So, I think that I'm not saying that no business should require a vaccination. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you have to seriously count the cost. You have to look at the individual circumstances, and people voluntarily have to work it out together. What I'm mainly concerned about, and I think the real problem, is massive government mandates. But, what can the church do? It can teach principles. What else can the church do? Well, in the Middle Ages, the church invented ways of working things out. It's called discourse. And so there would be forums where someone would come together and they would make their argument. And then there would be somebody who would make the counter argument, but they'd have to actually answer the points point by point. And then the first person gets to answer the answers. And they created this really robust system for getting to the bottom of truth. And it's like, everybody gets to show up. Everybody gets their say. No, you can't just attack somebody's motives. No, you actually have to read what they say and respond. At that point, the church, for all of its problems, was a beacon of truth. I'd like to see the church come back to that, so we could kind of get to the bottom of how much risk is there, and when are vaccines appropriate, and when should it be a condition of employment, and when shouldn't it be? But we don't have any of that. We don't have trusted resources. So at that point, I say we just have to go back to the principle of individual freedom and non-coercion. No threat of violence is where I would draw the line.
What about churches, again, that have people that are employing 100 plus people? And, should they be encouraging their parishioners that are in that role of trying to follow this unconstitutional executive order? Or should they say, no, I think you should practice civil disobedience where you feel is appropriate, right? So if you want to, give people who have naturally acquired immunity and opt out, then that should be what you should do. Should churches be providing that kind of moral guidance for their members who are business owners of these situations?
Okay, so we're not talking about members who are government officials in your question, right? Because that's easy for me. I think churches should teach the biblical limits of government, and excommunication is a different question. But they should at least use the teaching function to say that people, that you should not coerce people, right? That you can't take somebody's life. You can't take their body. You can't take their body even for 5 minutes to stick a needle in it. There's in some sense that's a kind of slavery. So I think the church can teach that with clarity. But now we're over to employers. David, I don't trust your typical church leader to have the wisdom at this point to help guide an employer on a question like this. I think we're either a wise people or we're not. And what I wouldn't want is for ministers to kind of like rev themselves up and pretend to be experts on exactly when there should be vaccines and when there shouldn't, because frankly, I think they're just going to tell. The tendency will be just to say the thing that the loudest faction of the church wants to hear. And I don't think that's right. So I'm on the opposite side of what I've said to ministers is, you are allowed to shut up. If there's an issue that you don't know enough about to speak about with authority from the pulpit, then it is better to say nothing than it is to say something that you really can't say with confidence is God.
Yeah. I do think that there needs to be some moral guidance within the church community. Maybe it's outside of the churches themselves to help people say, look, it's okay to protect people. If you've got just go back to the obvious, easy cases. People who've already had the disease, people who are wanting to get pregnant. They haven't been tested for that. It's unethical, in my opinion, to be a Christian and to tell a pregnant woman or someone who wants to be pregnant, you've got to lose your job in this crazy economy that's been screwed up by corporatists. You've got to lose your job or take this thing that hasn't been tested for pregnant women and what that does in the long term. That, to me, is a sin. I don't know how you could, do that. But, I guess there's weird little excuses like, the nursing homes, but to me, I think there needs to be some Christian backbone.
But is that an excuse, or is that, why do we believe in freedom? Because we believe when we make a blanket statement about something, we know that we should know that there might be situations that we never thought of,
right.
Which is why we believe in freedom. So, that's not a small thing. There are a lot of nursing homes, a lot of people have died of COVID in nursing homes. So what I want to do is say that ministers should teach broad moral principles, but they shouldn't engage in blanket mandates about how to run a business if they can't possibly anticipate all the situations.
Right.
I don't know. How many exceptions are there? That's why, what Hayek says is there's more knowledge out there in the marketplace than there is knowledge from any expert. And I would include the experts we call pastors.
Right. Yeah, it's a dark time that we're in. What do you think is going to happen here? Let's switch. I've asked you what you think Jesus would see in this ban, or this mandate, I should say, how he would deal with it. I've asked you how the church today should deal with it. Now I want to get your economist hat on for a moment and ask you, what is the economic fallout from this measure? 100 million people have potentially affected, millions more with the federal side of things, hospital workers being mandated if they take Medicare and Medicaid. There's already nursing shortages in a lot of places. There's already employee shortages in a lot of service worker jobs. This could be very, very dangerous, I think, for the economy, perhaps, right?
I think so, too. And we have a labor shortage, and this could make the labor shortage worse. And so it's hard to get people to come to work. And frankly, I think especially healthcare workers, nurses maybe in particular, and physicians' assistants have really kind of gone through hell over the past year and a half. And to basically say, for the government to come along and say, well, we're going to make you do something, otherwise you can't work. A lot of them are going to walk away from work. And then who are we helping? We already had a nurse shortage before COVID. Understand that. We already had a systemic shortage of nurses. Then we have COVID. Then we have a real nurse shortage. And then we're going to tell nurses, the government's going to say you can't work in a hospital unless you get the jab. Then we're going to have a nurse famine. And so how does that help public health? Having, a half of the nurses that we need. What about the cancer patients, et cetera? Is that really helping? But they're so laser focused on scapegoating people who don't get vaccinated that they're not even thinking about that. That doesn't even enter into their calculation. It's just, if you don't get vaccinated, then you must be one of those terrible deplorables, and you're a hater, and you hate your neighbor. And we're going to lock you down and punish you without paying any attention to the secondary consequences. And why should they? They didn't pay any attention to the secondary consequences of the lockdowns. Why would they start paying attention to the secondary consequences now of broad vaccine mandates? It's the conceit of knowledge that bothers me, the arrogance of somebody who isn't really dealing with the issues personally, just from some distant headquarters, whether it's conservative talk with pastors on one side or other pastors on the other side, or government bureaucrats just saying, I know better, and engaging in moral preening. I think there's serious economic consequences to this, but it's worse. But the consequences will be worse than the economy. They'll be human life, because disrupting the healthcare system further, they disrupted it so much. Oh, COVID's going to flood your hospital. Keep your hospitals, don't do chemo because people are going to flood in from COVID. So hospitals, didn't act at capacity because they were told about this terrible flood that's coming, and people didn't get their chemo or they didn't get their heart treatments, et cetera. I mean, this has been absolutely awful, and they're just continuing with their same foolish one-size-fits-all. I mean, vaccine is just kind of lockdown part 2. It's we know better, shut up, do as you're told, and it's going to cost more lives.
Right. A commenter says they should make employers sign a contract taking responsibility for the risks of the vaccine. Let's take a quick break. We're speaking with Jerry Bowyer, editor of townhallfinance.com. He's also the host of the Meeting of Minds podcast, which is available from the Salem Podcast Network. We'll be back with more on A Neighbor's Choice.
Who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day, they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved 2 people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com.
Hey, you ever wanted to get into the radio business, but no one is hiring? Well, if you'd like to give it a shot, we have entry-level openings right now. We'll teach you the basics of radio, and if you have what it takes, the sky's the limit. If you like talk radio, whether it's sports or news talk, email us today. Contact@newstalkflorida.com. That's contact@newstalkflorida.com. We have a lot of room for growth in both news talk and sports talk, so email us today. Contact@newstalkflorida.com.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gronowski here with Jerry Bowyer talking about the implications of Biden's executive orders going after people who have not taken the product that he has decreed must be taken to be a part of normal society. Why do you think, I want to ask your response, Jerry. You mentioned the scapegoating element going on. What was his point saying that his job is to protect the vaccinated from the unvaccinated? How in the world does that make any ethical or moral or scientific sense?
I know. I mean, choose a lane, man. I mean, either the vaccines are highly effective, in which case the vaccinated don't really need protection, or they're not highly effective, in which case, forcing everyone to get vaccinated offers little or no protection. So look, I'm not an expert on vaccines, and I just need to make clear I'm an economist. I'm going to talk about principles like government mandates. I am not taking a position on whether vaccines are a good idea or a bad idea. You're adults. You got to work that out for yourself. I'm not going to pretend to be an epidemiologist or a biochemist, and I know you're not asking me to, but I just don't want it on my conscience that I went out there and seemed to be taking a position on voluntary vaccination. You got to use your own judgment on that. But on the involuntary side of things, it just doesn't make any logical sense to say to people vaccines are really great and they reduce infections dramatically and they're extremely important. And yet, the vaccinated 52% of Americans need to be protected from the terrible, horrible disease spewing unvaccinated 48%. It doesn't make, it's completely illogical.
Yeah, and we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of 9/11, and it's kind of ironic in some ways that Biden, on the eve of that, and I think he probably did it on purpose to try to shift, to get something out there and then make it difficult to get a response from his political opponents because of everybody today is talking about 9/11. But to be able to say, hey, we had a war on terror for 20 years and started with going after Taliban, and Taliban's right back where they started. And we ended up in some cases demonizing people from Muslim communities in America.
Right.
And at the time, the conservatives weren't really caring about if they felt like they were looked at with suspicion. And then people who wear different headgear and so forth, that was like Sikhs, they were lumped into that group and attacked too.
Right.
So there was a lot of nastiness.
There were Sikhs murdered after 9/11.
Yeah.
They were interpreted. They weren't even Muslims, and of course, not all. It's absolutely unbelievable. And I didn't get a sense that conservatives really cared. And also, the other thing is, I think anybody, conservative or liberal, we got to get better at counting the cost of any kind of war. The war against the Taliban, the war against Saddam, the war against COVID, the war against drugs. What did Queen Elizabeth say? I don't like wars. They have uncertain outcomes. And I think we go to war. We all get hepped up about a war. We don't really count the cost in blood. And then we go. And then, more often than not, it has an uncertain outcome. And I think the same is true of our domestic social engineering wars or medical wars as for foreign adventures.
Right. So do you see this as the dawn of a new war on, domestic dissent from medical tyranny? I mean, it sounds like a whole new attempt is being started. Or is this a flailing last gasp of a D.C. uniparty that is so embarrassed from their blunderous withdrawal from Afghanistan that they're just flailing around as they kind of lose relevancy and credibility in the world stage and in America?
I think maybe both. That I think the last gasp tends to be the loudest gasp. In other words, like the last scream of the system. It's like they push hardest when they sense that the system is failing. So this can be the next big culture war. And I think the banning by technology companies, et cetera, and Wikipedia, people don't talk much about the cancel culture on Wikipedia. You can't question the public health orthodoxy in a whole lot of places or else you're declined, Now, again, I'm not taking sides. What I'm saying is have a debate where both sides are present. That's all, right? And then we'll listen to both sides and come to our own conclusions. So I think public health is the new excuse to suppress dissent. 2 or 3 years ago, it was things having to do with sexual identity. You said anything negative at all, about LGBTQ, that's it, your career's over. That still kind of happens, but now it's if you say anything questionable in terms of COVID or vaccine or masks or whatever, again, kind of career over. So they keep trying to do that. But isn't that a last gasp? David, if I were afraid of your arguments, I wouldn't answer them. I'd shut you up. If I were afraid of David Gornosky's voice, then I would try to cut the power on your radio broadcast, right? So I think their desire to ban is an implicit admission that their arguments are weak and that they're afraid.
Yeah, and so now we're going to go through a rocky time, and hopefully we can come out of it with more liberty and family-oriented society intact or rebounding if possible. Jerry, always great to hear from you, and I wanted to give a shout-out to your podcast, Meeting of Minds, which is on the Salem Podcast Network, and anything else you'd like to mention.
Something I wish I brought up earlier, maybe another time, talking about Jesus when he faced a pandemic in the area of the Sea of Galilee and how he dealt with it. I think is maybe a topic for another conversation in the future because it gives us an idea how he thought about risk and freedom.
Well, good idea. We'll do that again sometime. Jerry, thank you for joining me.
All right, thanks.
And that's it for Hour 1, folks. We'll be back for Hour 2 of our live broadcast. Stay with us. More guests and comments to continue.
Your home for news, talk, and information. 1040 WHPO Pinellas Park. Tampa Bay's all new News Talk 1040.
It's the only way I get news.
From ABC News. I'm Michelle Franzen. On the eve of remembrances for the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, security is heightened. President Biden will travel to all three memorial services. ABC's Aaron Katersky is in Lower Manhattan.
As the nation prepares to mark 20 years since the September 11th attacks, there are no new threats to New York City.
But we also understand the time that we're living in.
Police Commissioner Dermot Shea appeared with Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas, who said the terror threat has changed in the last 20 years.
And we are focused on the domestic violent extremist, the individual who is radicalized by an ideology of hate or false narratives spread on social media.
Security here on Saturday will involve thousands of police officers. Aaron Katersky, ABC News at the 9/11 Memorial in New York.
Florida Republican Governor Ron DeSantis criticized President Biden's new push for vaccine requirements for federal workers and businesses with 100 employees or more, vowing legal action.
We should be protecting people's jobs, not trying to kick people out of work right now. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing in Florida.
An appeals court also reinstated the governor's ban on school mask mandates. The president visiting a middle school in Washington, D.C. today, urging parents and teachers to use every tool available to protect kids who can't get vaccinated yet.
President Biden telling students it's not normal for politicians to be fighting over protecting their health from COVID.
One of the lessons I hope our students can unlearn is that politics doesn't have to be this way.
The president promising his administration will fight to keep mask mandates in states where Republican governors are banning them and do everything possible to get everyone vaccinated. Andy Field, ABC News, Washington.
The U.S. has temporarily halted all U.S.-bound flights of Afghan evacuees from overseas. The White House says that decision made after 4 cases of measles were discovered. You're listening to ABC News.
Let's see, if something costs less, but people are happier with it, that sounds like something to look into, and that's MediShare. Maybe you've heard switching to MediShare to pay for healthcare can save the typical family $500 a month. And that's huge, but it's also true that people are way more satisfied after making the switch, too. The customer satisfaction rate for MediShare is double that of the typical health insurance plan. Double. MediShare works. It's been around for more than a quarter century, and members have shared more than $3 billion of each other's bills. People love having telehealth and a huge nationwide PPO network. So, yeah, you can save a ton and like it better. Imagine being happy with how you're taking care of your health care. So if you're self-employed or part of the gig economy, or you just want a plan you're happy with, you can call right now and get a price within 2 minutes. A very, very smart use of 2 minutes. Here's the number you need. 877-26-BIBLE. That's 877-26-BIBLE. 877-26-BIBLE.
A battle between the world's most valuable company and a video game giant ending for now.
A federal judge in Northern California ruling Apple has violated California's unfair competition law by forcing Fortnite and its maker Epic Games to use Apple's payment system in the App Store. Apple takes a 30% cut out of in-app purchases. The judge issuing an injunction barring Apple from making app developers use its payment system, but she sided with Apple on another part of Epic's lawsuit, the judge stopping short of calling Apple a monopoly. Alex Stone, ABC News.
In Italy, a court decision on crosses in class.
The case began 13 years ago when Italian high school teacher Franco Coppoli took down the cross hanging above his desk and got suspended for 2 months without pay. Now, Italy's high court has ruled requiring crosses in classes is not compatible with the secular principle of the state. Both atheists and Catholics are claiming victory because while crosses now aren't required, they're also not banned. Megan Williams, ABC News, Rome.
New federal weather data show the summer of 2021 was slightly hotter than the previous record holder, the Dust Bowl summer of 1936. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration showing the average U.S. temperature for June, July, and August was 2.6 degrees warmer than average, with record hot summers for California, Idaho, Nevada, Oregon, and Utah. This is ABC News.
Your nose is the body's air filter, the first line of defense against airborne allergens, bacteria, and viruses. You wash your hands to protect your health. Now you can clean your nose with Navage. Online at Navage.com. Navage. Clean nose, healthy life.
Guten Tag. That's German. Yeah, I'm bilateral. Your cousin. From Boston. Sam Adams Oktoberfest is back for a limited time. It's hearty with a roasty sweetness. Hey, I can swear in German too. Watch this. Das. The Boston Beer Company, Boston, Mass. Enjoy responsibly.
Michelle Franzen, ABC News.
News Talk 1040, Tampa Bay weather forecast.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm meteorologist Ellen Archer at your News Talk 1040 WHPO Weather Center. We're expecting to stay partly cloudy through the weekend, just like today. From the west-southwest will be showers and thunder showers keying in any time of the day or night, with our thunder shower probabilities running at about 35% this afternoon, 40% tonight, 50% Saturday, only 25% Sunday. The high is at 90, low 76 here at News Talk 1040 WHPO.
This portion of the upcoming amazing broadcast is brought to you by the law firm of Catania & Catania, award-winning personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys, serving Tampa Bay families for over 28 years.
The following broadcast is a paid program and does not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of Genesis Communications, its management, staff, or advertisers.
From the heart of Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media. A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gronowski. So glad to be with you again live for another hour. We are coming to you on FM and AM podcast, video stream worldwide on our website, neighborschoice.com, and our FM AM affiliate in Tampa Bay is our flagship station. You want to make sure you set it to this dial every day, Monday through Friday. If you're listening on radio, you can call in. Don't be shy. 727-587-1040. That's 727-587-1040 if you have a question or comment you'd like to share on air. Or, as many of you do, you can email us hello@aneighborschoice.com or write us a comment on our live stream, which is available at Rumble. Let's look at some of the comments coming in today so far. We have Lucas saying, I'm convinced that we are going to win this mandate fight. It might be a slog, exhausting, and drawn out, but dissent has reached a critical mass. There is now an intransigent minority that will not budge and will continue to move the fence on the center. Ideally, another commenter says, the administration of these vaccines should be observed over several generations for negative effects. Another commenter says, proud to be in the control group of this worldwide experiment. Another comment, there will be political opportunists that use the sentiment on the ground opposing these mandates to run their campaigns on. This will be a further wrench in elite plans. When a few politicians defect, they can no longer create unanimity. Another commenter says, so many are volunteering to be a part of the experimental group. Another commenter says, the same people that tell you the unvaccinated are putting the vaccinated at risk brag that the hospitals are filled with idiots who didn't get vaccinated. The narrative is twisted into knots. Another commenter says, my stepmother and brother are all for unvaccinated camps where all the staff can be the unvaxxed nurses. Another comment says there's more than enough holes in the narrative for people to ask questions. Another commenter says many nurses haven't been vaccinated, but hospitals are mandating them. And commenter responding to our previous guest, Jerry Bowyer, says your speaker is not taking into consideration the evidence of the products being unhealthy. Another commenter says another commenter says that the argument against natural immunity from original COVID fades, with which I said to the person, you mean like the products themselves. The next response is that there are some really healthy people on the hospital, and I responded like the number of healthy people in the VAERS database who have had some terrible effects. So, this is the kind of debate we should be allowed to have in a free society. It's not, the government does not own us. They don't own our minds. They don't own science. They didn't trademark it. They don't patent science. And anybody who believes that nonsense is, headed in a bad direction for their own health and safety. You cannot believe that only science is that which is patented and brought to you by giant corporations advertise to you on TV. That's stupid. We would have never had Galileo. We would have never had Tesla. We would have never had anybody who changed the game because they went up against the establishment, giant patented financial cartels that try to get their fingers wrapped around markets and control what's called science or technology or medicine. I saw that dictator is trending worldwide on social media before they could, try to manipulate what's allowed to be seen as trending. And that's interesting. But another thing I wanted to point out is that the comment Candace Owens made, she said the Biden administration is attempting to empower the IRS to monitor every single withdrawal, deposit, and transaction you make from your personal banking accounts, PayPal, Venmo, etc. Separately, he wants to force vax you. Everything they lied and said Trump was, Biden is. I certainly think there's a point there. They made Trump out to be an unprecedented fascist. But, what the interventions he did were never aggressive at all, like what this fool has done in the first few months. To claim that is the opposite is you've got to be delusional. And again, Biden and Trump are closer politically than I am to either one of them. But it's just obvious for people who are not stuck on the stupid Kool-Aid what's going on here. Jacob Bogage, he says, White House official tells me U.S. postal workers are not included in Biden's vaccine requirement, but we strongly encourage them to comply with these standards. That's a massive chunk of the federal workforce, 644,000 and growing. That's not required to be vaccinated. So they must have had a good union protecting them, huh? That's where they got some bargaining power there, I guess. And so you see that it's not about science, about who gets it. It's about who's got political power in D.C. that determines what happens to who and how that goes down. Glenn Greenwald tweets about the order. The president has the power acting alone to set health policies for private employers, forcing them to fire their workers who don't comply. We've allowed presidential powers to become virtually limitless. Well, Congress has, but this is quite a power. Well, it doesn't matter to people who are unprincipled. They hate the founders. They hate anything that talks about restraining government. They hate it. They just want to win at all costs, and it's a worshipful religion of the state, and it must be defeated intellectually and culturally. I want to switch gears to look at something interesting about the trends in our future generations. Revolver had a story saying, behold, the brave new world, big mommy government is here to keep you nice and safe. And it's linking to this comment that Professor David Buss says. He says, a shift that has profound consequences for mating, sex ratio imbalances combined with mate preferences. When he quotes this from the Wall Street Journal, universities had 1.5 million fewer students compared with 5 years ago, and men accounted for 71% of the decline. So men are dropping out rapidly out of the university system. Another comment along this line in this development, Joffrey Miller responds. He's a commentator. He says, as men become rarer on college campuses, men gain more bargaining power to pursue their preferred mating strategies, short-term, low-commitment novelty seeking. This intensifies hookup culture, frustrates women, and increases the socio-political conflict between the sexes. So I think you'll continue to see that story play out in the stories you hear on campuses, but you'll see a lot of quick and vast exodus of men leaving university systems. I think they realize this is not a place to get a wise investment for my future. If I want to build a business, I want to build technology, I want to have a career that's actually like useful for building roads or fixing, construction damages, things like that, instead of going to hear about why math is wrong and Shakespeare is an idiot and Newton is a racist and all this stupid, whiny, navel-gazing, rich, decadent, six-figure professor stuff. That's where you go. You don't go to universities anymore to get good, solid, foundational, intelligent thought. I certainly didn't learn anything except for nonsense in most of my university classes. Most of my learning came from the library, where I was able to check out books that were not assigned and learn on my own time what I really wanted to learn. Good library there. So moving on to some other little bits of stories here in the news. Here's a story that's interesting that has relevance to our time. I hope you can see this. This is in medicalexpress.com. And it says, third of cancer drugs without proven clinical benefit continue to be recommended for patients. This is by the British Medical Journal, actually. 1/3 of cancer drugs that received accelerated approval from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Remember those good old trusted people that say, y'all ain't horses and cows, y'all. Those stupid people. This is what they do. They push 1/3 of cancer drugs that received accelerated approval continue to be recommended in clinical guidelines after their confirmatory clinical trials failed to show improvement on their primary endpoints. This is a study published in the British Medical Journal today. A primary endpoint is the main result that is measured at the end of a study to see if a given treatment has worked. What the primary endpoint will be is decided before the study begins. The researchers say clinical guidelines should be better aligned with the results of post-approval trials of cancer drugs that received accelerated approval. The FDA's accelerated approval pathway allows drugs onto the market before their effectiveness has been proven to hasten patient success to promising new drugs. But as part of this approval, the manufacturer must conduct post-approval trials to confirm clinical benefit. If these trials show no benefit, the drug's approval can be withdrawn. And they searched the FDA database for all cancer drugs granted accelerated approval from the start of the program in 92 until December 2020 and identified 18 indications for 10 cancer drugs that failed to show clinical benefit in post-approval trials. So there you go. There's your good old reliable, embarrassing crony capitalist-owned FDA. They tell you to eat seed oil sludge. They tell you to eat all this nonsense. They told you to take OxyContin when it was approved by them, and then the guy that they had approve it went on to work for Purdue Pharma that was marketing OxyContin. They even put in an insert without serious evidence to say that it doesn't have any serious problem for addiction. These are not reliable people. They tell you to eat toxic seed oil, waste sludge, vegetable oils, which are causing heart disease, diabetes, obesity, cancer, autoimmune disorders, mental health problems, the whole gamut of all the problems that we're dealing with. These people are disgraceful for what they've been approving. Idiots, at the very least, and evil if they're turning a blind eye to this kind of dubious garbage science that they use to back up their claims that we're the end-all, be-all. Look what they've done to us. Hundreds of thousands of people dying every day, every year for heart disease that could have been solved if we stopped listening to their garbage, crony, capitalist-approved information. It's an absolute disgrace. And, you know, it reminded me of the interview I did with Professor Bruce Hammock of UC Davis and his team. And they pointed out that their funding and research that comes from, in part, because they're trying to develop a drug that can block the effects of what linoleic acid does to our body. Linoleic acid is that omega-6 fatty acid that does an absolute nasty number to so much of your body's full health. It's the worst thing you could put in your body at the rates we're doing. It's natural, in its natural form before vegetable oils were introduced. It wasn't a problem. But in the amounts that you find them in the vegetable oils you're eating everywhere you look, at restaurants, the pork fat, the chicken fat that you eat that's fed corn and soy, this linoleic acid is absolutely 100% toxic, and it's the primary thing driving what's going on in chronic diseases. And they were getting funding to explore what linoleic acid does only because, again, they're trying to turn it into a product, into a drug, right? That's the only way you get any funding in academia for research. It has to be in the exploration of a new patentable product. That's how you get the big money to come alongside you. And I'm not saying that's a knock. That's the way their system is geared because of government intervening into the economy and intervening into the funding mechanisms for how we do science. So it has to be a patentable product to get the kind of big money behind it to get through the FDA process for approval. And so, you know, rather than, you know, all the money coming to, if these people cared about us, the government would be pushing the funding to tell us, hey, stop eating linoleic acid. But that's not the answer. It's just, let's come up with the drug that blocks the effects of linoleic acid. That's how they treat you. Keep eating the junk, and we're going to get a new drug to try to block some of the junk that it's just like with statins. You know, They don't tell you to stop eating the seed oils, which is causing the problems with heart disease. They just tell you, hey, take a drug that will have some other side effects and toxic effects to you, but it will mitigate some of the effects that our erroneous food pyramid tells you to eat. You see how this works? It's a scheme. It's rotten to the core. It's ridiculous. It's absurd. And every human being should be resisting and stopping this junk from continuing to poison millions of more people's lives. Now is the time for a renaissance. Let's make it happen by educating us and equipping our culture and equipping our communities with the truth. Back in a moment.
David Gronowski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals, join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa. Not attorney spokeswoman. Hey, you ever wanted to get into the radio business, but no one is hiring? Well, if you'd like to give it a shot, we have entry-level openings right now. We'll teach you the basics of radio, and if you have what it takes, the sky's the limit. If you like talk radio, whether it's sports or news talk, email us today. contact@newstalkflorida.com. That's contact@newstalkflorida.com. We have a lot of room for growth in both news talk and sports talk, so email us today. contact@newstalkflorida.com.
A Neighbor's Choice returns. I'm your host, David Gronowski. Commenter on our live stream, Keith, says the average woman are having sex at a much higher rate than the average man. A recent study found women have adopted the male sexual strategy by and large because it's empowering. I guess that's in reference to the news that the colleges are emptying out of men. Men are getting the heck out of Dodge. They realize all the courses end with them being the villain, the Hunchback of Notre Dame in every case, the Phantom of the Opera, the monster, the Grendel. And so they're saying, I think I've seen enough of this story. I think I'm just going to go study something that can actually improve my life and learn something. So it's going to create an imbalance of men and women on campus, which will give more advantage for the men in the dating market, so to speak, for when there's way more women than men. That tends to kind of change the game a little bit. When you look at this Fox News headline, it's a sad thing. It says, Jimmy Kimmel says unvaccinated people shouldn't get ICU beds in his return to his late night show. Isn't that a sad thing? You know, how shameful is that? What kind of barbaric nonsense is this? Is he trying to curry favor with his big pharmaceutical ads for erectile dysfunction or whatever it is he's selling online at night? I mean on TV shows at night. It's ridiculous to see what in the world these people are thinking when they talk about people in such a disgusting, bigoted way. That's not normal, acceptable discourse. You don't say, if you don't take my product, then you go and die without treatment. See, that's what I'm telling you. These people think they're so morally better than everybody, but they're trying to roll back the principles of Christianity that we've taken for granted. It was Christianity that said no matter who you are, where you're from, you get treated in the hospital. And if you can't afford it, we'll work it out if you're poor. That was the universal call to care for people. But now these people, they think they're better than Christianity. They think they're better than Jesus. And so they say, oh, in my world, if you don't agree with my experimental products, you shouldn't be treated if you have a life-threatening problem. Just die. You know? It's just disgusting. This is what's considered comedy. This is a joke. This guy's ratings are falling like a rock, too. I mean, he's irrelevant. So now he's just become like a Pravda reporter. Greetings, everyone. This is what the state party wants me to say to you today. All hail the glorious state. Yes. Woo. You know, it's like, come on, what a disgrace. Thomas Massey, the congressman from Kentucky, says 18 months, 2 presidents, a mail-in election, 3 shots, $5 trillion, a year of delayed schooling, and a shredded constitution to slow the spread. And that's just the half of it, really. But it's a great summary of this nonsense that we're in. Here's a story Peter Quinona has shared. LA Times says the LA school officials order sweeping student vaccine mandate, a first by a major district. So now they're going to mandate this for kids in that district. Sad place. Sad place that they don't want to show respect like ethical, sane society should do. Josh Kraushaar pointed out something in an NPR story. He said, one thing I didn't realize, only 24% of pregnant women are fully vaccinated as of last month. That's going to be an interesting constituency to watch when the mandates get implemented. And that, made me think, that ethical and sane societies always leave pregnant women out of medical experiments, especially for-profit medical experiments with legal immunity. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. These people have lost their minds, and I hope the rest of the country will wake up and stop this tyranny. You do not put kids, you do not put pregnant women or women that want to get pregnant, you don't put them in these situations. You don't put any human being. But since moral principles don't seem to matter to people, I'm trying to make it more, concrete for people. Because a lot of people have been raised by government schools and government worshiping TV, and so they don't deal with abstract principles of every human person has free will. So you got to paint pictures of more concrete examples like pregnant women or children to kind of put some more visual, context to what's going on, Jack Posobiec of Human Events, I quote him a lot because he's got a lot of good inside tips. He's got a lot of sources in the White House that kind of scoop stuff early. He says Kamala had little to nothing to do with the COVID speech yesterday. Ron Klain and Fauci all had hands in it. Jill, which is Joe's wife, she wanted to go full Australia, according to a White House official. So she's angry. She's going nuts in there. She's mad. And she wanted to go full Australia. You never want to go full Australia. Can't even drink more than, 6 beers. It's a sad place right there. And we're sad about what's going on over there. And I hope that they can get rid of that nonsense. Michael Tracy had a good point that I wanted to cover real quick. He says the primary constituency served by a federal vaccine mandate is affluent, vengeful neurotics whose sense of comfort depends on the government coercing their perceived cultural inferiors into compliance. I think that's an accurate depiction. We saw earlier the numbers show that it's the poor people in our society that have not been more likely to get this product as demanded by their government. It's these affluent, neurotic people that want to pick on and put their thumb and push their foot onto the backs of people because they're so insecure and miserable that they need that to feel better about people. It's really a sick state of mind to be. But we're going to break through that. We're going to stay positive. We're going to stay positive and joyful through the midst of this storm and build back a place of love and liberty and creativity. Back with Jim Babka after this.
What's everyone saying about the all-new News Talk 1040 WHBO?
It's an easy way to get news.
I like your stories.
It's my style. Really interesting conversations.
News Talk.
It's every day. From morning to night to the next day is on.
Once again, it's just great. It's good for all of us.
I'm a new listener for about 8 months now.
You guys give me hope, and I wanted to thank you for that.
Tampa Bay. The news and talk of Tampa Bay.
I just love that station.
News Talk 1040 WHBO.
At a middle school in Washington promoting his new plan to require vaccinations for up to 100 million Americans, President Biden.
I am so disappointed that particularly some Republican governors have been so cavalier with the health of these kids.
Saying he's ready to support businesses that refuse to require worker vaccinations, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis.
We should be protecting people's jobs, not trying to kick people out of work right now. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing in Florida.
Separately, an appeals court ruling to keep Florida's ban on student mask mandates in place, at least until it issues a final ruling on its legality. The U.S. is stopping all inbound flights of Afghan evacuees from 2 main bases overseas after discovering some of those on board have measles. A former Rudy Giuliani associate pleads guilty to soliciting a political contribution from a foreign national. Prison time's possible. Chuck Sievertson, ABC News.
News Talk 1040 Tampa Bay weather forecast.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm meteorologist Ellen Archer at your News Talk 1040 WHBO Weather Center. We're expecting to stay partly cloudy through the weekend, just like today. From the west-southwest will be showers and thundershowers keying in any time of the day or night, with our shower-thundershower probabilities running at about 35% this afternoon, 40% tonight, 50% Saturday, only 25% Sunday. The high is at 90, low 76 here at News Talk 1040 WHBO.
David Granosky here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER.
A Neighbor's Choice returns. David Granosky here. We're live on radio worldwide on our podcast, video stream on Rumble. Search for A Neighbor's Choice if you want to watch us on live stream. You can also listen to the audio live stream on aneighborschoice.com. You'll see on the homepage a player. You just click play from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time if you want to hear us live that way. If you're on radio, set it to this station. Looking at our comments, Jose says, hello all the way across the international date line in Guam. Welcome, Jose. Glad you could join us. We love hearing from our international listeners and viewers, the really great contributions you guys make to this fight for liberty and nonviolence and beauty. We're joined now by a commentator and someone who has also been on the front lines of activism to downsize D.C., Jim Babka. How you doing, Jim?
I'm great. I'm glad to be here. It's been a while. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, we're going to have to get you on more often because you always provide such great insights. And, I wanted to just kind of open it up for a kind of a freewheeling conversation that will allow folks to kind of engage with what we're thinking right now together. Because you and I are fans of Rene Girard, and he talks a lot about scapegoating, and we've been reading about it in history. If you read Rene Girard's books, he talks about this plague and that plague and how people always get caught up in an accusatory spirit where they want to blame somebody who's not following the protocol, whether it's a ritual or a rite or, certain taboos that have been established that you're not allowed to break. There's all kinds of little trigger opportunities, and usually demagogues and priests are there willing to stoke up the crowd. I think of Apollonius, the ancient pagan miracle worker of Tyana, and he was in the city of Ephesus, the text says, and he saw there was a plague, and he got a crowd whipped up, and he said, hey, it's this beggar who did it. This beggar caused this plague, and they didn't want to go along at first. They're like, why? He's just a blind beggar. And then at one point, the crowd, he kept saying, no, he's the one. And they locked eyes with him, and they said they could see fire beaming out of his eyes like he was a hell demon. They threw stones at him, and the text says that underneath the stones, he had transfigured into a demon, a hell demon dog. And that's an ancient text. And they said that the plague went away after that. And Girard points out that to show that, look, the whole world has been in this kind of context whenever there's a plague or famine. Well, here we go again. 2,000 years after Jesus said, hey, it's time to finish that way of doing things, they're trying again to come up with a scapegoat class. What's your take, Jim?
Well, if I recall correctly, Girard went one step further and suggested that science was impossible when you're in the thralls of such superstitions, right? It's clearing away the scapegoating mechanism and the resulting sacrifice that makes science possible. And I find it interesting that we have been told lies repeatedly by the scientific establishment. We know they were lies because we have the proof now. We know, for example, that they knew that there was some minimal benefit to masks, and it is very, very minimal. But they knew there was some minimal benefit to the mask, but initially they were saying don't mask. They initially told us that the vaccine was prophylactic. It was going to protect us from being infected. We now know from Israel and Scotland and other places that that's not true. They suppressed hydroxychloroquine. I wrote an article about this for a temporary project I was working on that people can still find on Substack called The Exit Network. They look for The Exit Network on Substack.com. We actually spent 90 hours reading the studies and finding out that there was a massive fraud in terms of how the studies were conducted that were designed to make hydroxychloroquine look bad, and they were driven to this narrative by their hatred for Trump. And so we were able to demonstrate that there are people that it is working for people. The treatment's been working. I don't know as much about the ivermectin story as I do the hydroxychloroquine, but we just saw the agenda-setting media leading everybody around by the nose and stoking up the crowd, to say we prefer Barabbas, right? They're saying, oh, it's horse dewormer, right? It's horse dewormer. And the biggest story of all, which continues to be not covered by the regime media, which is that this likely leaked from a Wuhan lab. That story is no longer a hypothesis or a theory. It is the best explanation of what happened. The actual hypothesis or theory, in fact, likely invented story, is that it came from a wet market, and even more spectacularly, that there was an active cover-up, starting with Anthony Fauci, apparently, to keep us from finding out the truth about what they did and did not fund and what all the connections were. And so I've just recounted for you just now 5 major lies that have been told to us by the so-called scientific establishment in the midst of this because they're in the thrall of a superstition.
Right. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's superstition. I was looking at this comment, and again, you listen to the media, and they always want to let you know that none of these things have ever been approved for this disease. And then they say, so they could really, really get you. They could really, really get you. But, ivermectin has been used by humans for decades it's got way more data in terms of long-term. Does it have dangerous side effects in large quantities of populations of people that take it? 4 billion people allegedly have taken it, billions of doses. So, so when that's put into the situation, it gives more clarity. Of course, they're in the process right now of making a new patentable drug. Pfizer is phase 1 studies of a novel oral antiviral therapeutic agent against SARS-CoV-2. And it's talking about in their abstract for the paper on the site on the NIH.gov where you can read it. It's talking about how it's a potent protease inhibitor with potent antiviral activity against SARS-CoV-2, and they reference ivermectin. They say results. Ivermectin was found as a blocker of viral replicase protease in human TMPRSS2, which could be the biophysical basis behind its antiviral efficiency. Whoa! So, it's just, what do we do, Jim, when the mob doesn't seem to have the humility or the time to learn basic facts here, to say, wait a second, they're telling me this thing's garbage, it's only for animals. No, it's not. Wait a second, it's really dangerous. No, it's been used for decades. And again, then the mechanism that Pfizer's using to come up with a new patentable product is using the same mechanism that this thing seems to be doing. Why can't people just have the ability to process this? I don't understand it.
Well, there does seem to be something inherent to our makeup. I don't know exactly where it came from, but it does seem that we respond with a adrenaline response, lighting up the same fight or flight mechanisms that we have in our brain when we sense danger, to mere disagreement. And we're sent easily into a rage. And I have personally been trying to focus as much as possible on being cognizant of this in myself and trying to find ways to avoid unnecessary conflict. Try not seeking out, excuse me. By the way, I'm recovering from COVID, and occasionally we'll still cough. But I had it last month. Trying to avoid having these adrenaline-based responses, and trying to figure out ways to respond with grace. I had the privilege yesterday of being on a group call that you were also on, and sharing my thoughts that a good shorthand to Gerard. I'm not saying it's the complete story, but a good shorthand is the practice of empathy and trying to recognize that the people that I'm speaking to are human beings, but also trying to make sure that I'm sharing my personal experiences with them as a human being, or the personal testimonies of others who are suffering or been abused. And so I, for example, have made the purposeful decision up until now, and the executive order that just came, I think a legal executive order that just came out of the Biden White House yesterday afternoon, may put me in a really difficult position here shortly. But I have been choosing to not get vaccinated. I've already had COVID, so that's better. But most importantly, because I wanted to identify with the victim. And I see in Jesus an example where he did side with the victims, and he even approached and touched the unclean and healed them, lepers. He was not scared that he was going to get the disease. He instead went forward in faith and provided healing. And so I think that it's important to try to identify with the victim, tell the stories of the victim, and try to draw attention to those who do care about you, that you are an example, that you're a rational example of a model of behavior. I'm not really a huge fan of trying to have a scientific argument with people. I'm not a scientist, and I'm not sure that a lot of the anti-vax arguments hold up. I definitely don't believe they're persuasive. I've not seen any evidence that they change anybody's mind on the other side of this issue. But I do think empathetic stories, telling your personal story, identifying with the weak and the downtrodden, and choosing to share the testimonies of others. It is categorically wrong, the last thing I'll say, that we would take people who fear this vaccine, even if their fears are unfounded. It is still categorically wrong that we would take away their bodily autonomy and we would diminish that. It's a violation of the Nuremberg principles. It's just a violation of decent humanity. It's a violation of the medical rule, which says, first, do no harm.
Yeah, and I know that you're someone who believes that you should privatize governance, but And some in the inverse way, the opposite of that, in some sense, is what we have today, which I call anarcho-tyranny, this idea of lawlessness. That's where we're at today. It's lawlessness. And it's chaos. It's just ruled by fiat, CDC trying to, control people's rent and property management. Then you got,
correct.
Yeah, you got CDC saying we're going to ban guns. You got the Federal Reserve talking about they're going to fight climate change through printing money. I mean, what in the world? It's crazy what we're dealing with. It's lawlessness, total chaos.
It is lawlessness. I like that you called it anarchy, because anarchy is frequently thought of as, we don't have as many rules, we don't have laws, we're free of anybody having authority over us. Well, this is an institution, that was supposed to kind of watch the watchers, right? But who is watching those watchers, right? Who is watching them? Who's keeping an eye on what they're doing? And I have to say is, the American people have been kind of off the job all along. There's been a lot of tiny intrusions that built up to the point where you have a CDC or an OSHA or an FDA. There's a lot of tiny intrusions that come along the way, and they creep up on us until suddenly now we're besieged. And they have more power than we ever realized they had. And, we find ourselves in the mess that we're in today.
Yeah, it's a mess. I wanted to ask you, do you think the motivation from a psychological perspective is Biden and his little team? Not really Biden. He's just there to read the script, but, to shift they're frustrated. Gerard says that when you're angry and you can't take your frustration on the person that caused the anger, you go to a third party and kick it, So Biden got caught with his pants down, and his whole regime got humiliated and laughed at in Afghanistan. The whole world's laughing at them to this day about how disgraceful their ending of it was. It was just bungled. You can't get the people out, people getting killed. You make them all go out of the Kabul airport in the middle of the city instead of Bagram, all the different things that I've had military veterans come on and talk about. But then you look at stories like this in the New York Times. Evan Hill reports the final act of the U.S. war in Afghanistan was a drone strike in Kabul, killed 10 people. Our latest investigation shows how a man the military saw as an imminent threat, an ISIS facilitator, was actually an aid worker returning to his family. They thought that he was, they were tracking him for 8 hours with a drone. They thought he was packing explosives. It turns out it was actually water containers for his home. He was a 14-year employee of Nutrition and Educational International, a U.S. NGO that fights malnutrition. He helped start up soy factories, so he was probably trying to help get the Americans to put that soybean oil sludge in all the Afghanistan folks. He was just doing his job. He was doing repair machinery and transported his colleagues to distribute food to displaced Afghans with his Toyota Corolla. And so him and his family were just having a normal day, and then all of a sudden, bam, they get killed. So that's the legacy of what, Milley, that's, he talks about white rage. Is that white rage that he shot and killed an innocent person of color and his family for no reason? You know what I mean? And so I wonder, are they just mad and flailing about right now? So they're like Chris Farley. They're falling all over the stage, making a fool of themselves. The whole world's like, what the heck is wrong with you, you frickin' losers in D.C.? You think you're better than everybody, and you're making a fool of everything you say you stand for. So now they're going over to America and kicking on people who haven't taken their decreed medicine. Is that what's going on here?
Well, I mean, to some degree, yes. I mean, it's clearly the media, the regime media calls the tune. I mean, there's agenda setting at work here. We talk about the things that the media picks for us to talk about, by and large, and much of the way that the Afghanistan story has been handled, frankly, has been such that it was designed to bring conflict and rage between people, to get people to kind of, call for somebody's head and somebody needs to be punished. And Biden has successfully, and his team, has successfully turned the narrative, and now we're not talking about that anymore. Now we're talking about something else. And so, yeah, I mean, I have no doubt that they're jubilant that they have, turned the tide in terms of what it is that we're discussing, even if he can't execute or pull off everything that he said he was going to do in that speech, because I do think some of it is blatantly and obviously unconstitutional. And I also think that there's going to be an outcry, because I don't think there's going to be the level of compliance that they're expecting. There's going to be people who comply right away, but I don't think there's going to be a level of compliance that they're expecting.
Right. Let's take a quick break. We're speaking with Jim Babka. We'll be right back live on A Neighbor's Choice after this short message.
is your neighbor. Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day, they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved 2 people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa. Not attorney spokeswoman.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gronowski, your host. Looking at our friend from Guam, he on our comment stream, he says, our governor has instituted executive orders for vax verification, mask mandates, and only vaxxed folks could congregate to include a fine schedule for first, second, and third violations. Terrible. Well, man, I thought it was paradise over there in Guam. Goodness, that's terrible to hear that. He said he's banking on his natural immunity, and being unvaxxed is like being a disciple following Jesus. We're shunned and being demonized as the group who's spreading the problem. Okay. Disavowed says, this is the best talk radio out there. This guy should replace Rush. Well, we can't replace Rush. Rush is one of a kind guy. He did his own thing. We can only do what we do and do it the best we can. Jim Babka joins me now. So, Jim, when you look at all this nonsense and chaos coming out of D.C., do you think that, again, that this is something that governors and states are going to start really asserting their powers again? Is this the time for decentralization to actually be successful? Biden says if the governor's getting his way, he's going to get them out of the way. So what's that supposed to mean?
Well, I would be more encouraged if I didn't think that some of them who have, stood up the most, let's take Mr. DeSantis, for example. I know you're probably very familiar with him, right?
Yeah.
But, I think he's running for president. So I think he's going to play this in a political fashion, and he'll do what he thinks is going to connect. And I don't know how strongly they'll respond. The stuff that's going down right now is serious enough. The threats that are being issued have taken on a whole new level that, I don't think we should be reticent to begin discussing the possibility of secession. The idea that the President of the United States can act like a king, that he can issue an edict, that he can run it through a regulatory bureaucracy instead of the People's Congress, that it is a power that he is claiming that exists outside of the Constitution in the first place, thereby violating the 10th Amendment, and that he's cutting short even in the regulatory process. He's using emergency powers so that he doesn't have to go through the normal regulatory process, which includes a time of public comment and hearings, and taking in studies and taking away all those steps and trying to rush something through that can be imposed on private businesses with no federal government contracts whatsoever. So it's not a contractual term either. Each of these four things that I've just referenced are terribly tyrannical and dangerous precedents. Now, we didn't get here by accident. There's been 1,000 other smaller crimes. But the Declaration of Independence says that, there's a certain point when there's been a long train of abuses and there's one abuse too many. And I think at this hour, it's reasonable to start having an open discussion about whether or not this is a union that can continue to hold together. We clearly have a very different set of values, and our founding charter is clearly, rubbish at this moment.
But how can you do that when you have this reigning DC progressive ideology, which is imperialistic and it wants to impose its religious narratives through the force of gun? That's why they were doing their, the murals of George Floyd in Kabul. Like, what does that, they want you to be a part of their stuff. They want to put their fingers all in your life. They're not going to stop if you say, hey, we're the free state of Texas. They're going to say, oh, really? You just put a red flag up to a bull. They're going to go even more.
Yeah, the problem is that too many of the people on the right have also been very much state worshipers, and they very much have been behind in art during the adult period of our lifetime. They've very much been behind the military and all of the causes that have caused our destruction in the civil liberties arena, right? The spying and surveillance. These are all Republican creations back very much, and the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq were George W. Bush creations, and he was a good Christian president. I think there's a degree to which we have the obviously both sides have tried to lead us to statist solutions on a variety of questions, and when they cut their deals in their back room, instead of the Republicans standing up and living by the rhetoric that they had available that they used during campaign season, they've instead cut deals to bring pork back to their districts and have continued to bust the budgets and spend more and more and more money. So it's both sides. There's a pox on both houses at this point, and Americans who want to get back to something better in the form of the Constitution, or who want to go forward and say, look, we've got to shed off old things and try to come up with new wineskins, stuff that respects the individual liberty of the people. We're a government that's either so small or non-existent that it doesn't intrude into the personal decisions of one's life. Until we get to that point and are willing to stand up for it, we're going to keep getting more of the same. We can't just keep blaming the fact that the progressives always win. Why? Oh, shucks, they always win. That's just not going to stand. I mean, there was attempts at all these junctures to stop all of this stuff, and not enough will to be morally and intellectually consistent about the power of the state. You give it a little bit of power, you're going to find out later that some other guy down the road is going to get that office, and he's going to use that same power in bad ways. So, in closing, would Jesus force someone to take a product and inject it in their body or be fired and not be able to feed their family? No, I don't believe that at all. This is a really interesting thing because clearly there's been attempts to say that Jesus would tell everybody to wear masks, and Jesus would do this and Jesus would do that. But the idea that someone is fearful, is scared, believes that this product is going to somehow or other harm them, and yet we're going to put them through the psychological torture of insisting that they have to take it at the expense of their livelihood. This is really close. We're really on the edge right now of Mark of the Beast type stuff. And I don't think this is pro-Christ. I think this is the Antichrist. And so where can people find your work if they want to follow what you're doing on that note? It's much more secular in what I'm doing, but Downsize DC, we have Agenda Setters by Downsize DC, where we're trying to do things to reform how Congress operates and reform criminal justice. So they can check out the initiatives we have at downsizedc.org. And the Zero Aggression Project, zeroaggressionproject.org. We just updated and re-released Perry Willis's history of U.S. foreign interventions, showing that many of the lies that wars we were in are based on lies, and that they almost all were incompetently carried out. And even the good war, the so-called good war of World War II, wasn't all it was cracked up to be. So people can check that out on zeroaggressionproject.org. Well, very good. Thanks again, Jim Babka, for joining us. Thanks, David. And here we have a great weekend, folks, and hope you spend some good time with your family as we remember 9/11 on this 20th anniversary. And let's build a future of peace and love and nonviolence. Let's take care of our neighbors. Let's roll up our sleeves and solve problems ourselves. I'm David Gronowski. Godspeed.
your home for news, talk, and